Hey, well, welcome to the Dream Labs. It's Dr. Contrast Live. I hope all is well with you. And just before I begin here, I want to just explain my apologies for a Tuesday situation with the holiday coming up. I just had a bit of a schedule conflict on Tuesday. Wasn't able to go ahead and live stream here, but we're back in action today. And I just thought it'd be kind of fun today to maybe reverse things just a touch. I'm going through some mechanical things, some industrial design materials, whether it's car, product, architecture, interior space. I think it'd be kind of nice just to kind of turn it around a little bit and go into something that show you, for example, by demonstration and some examples of what I love to do in my just a quiet moments. Just there's something about watercolor studies that really I really do enjoy. Difficult medium. I'm still practicing at it. It's not an easy thing to command, but I thought I'd maybe start today with just showing some of the work I've been doing in watercolor. And it's more of a landscape approach. I've done things in automobile design, architecture. I've done all that stuff in watercolor, but I've really kind of spent a lot of time more recently doing a lot of landscape art and design work with some watercolor added to it. So these little thumbnail sketches, and what I like to do when I work with watercolor is I will start out with like a storyboard of some sort, and this is the kind of sketch work that I kind of start with. I'll go through a series of maybe some building compositions and look at just maybe light source and tone and go through some of the combinations where I want the view to be dead on. Do I want to turn the perspective a little bit? Do I want to put together a full composition and elevation and change a little bit of the detail in some of the outbuildings? And then finally, it just ended up the composition that looked like this, and just put some little value to it. Just kind of put the composition down. All thinking in terms of in this family, for example, I'm showing you 5x7 studies, just nice little fast little quick watercolor color sketches. And these thumbnail sketches take about maybe 20 to 30 minutes just to kind of, if that, just to put some composition together to find out what do I want to work with here? Where are the values going to fall? What's the sky? Which is ground? How much material am I going to work with in terms of building content and the light source and all the other elements we dealt with in the past here? So this is one approach here, and I'll come back in a moment and show you some of the offshoots of the watercolor studies here. This is kind of neat. That was the first thing I want to show you. And then again, another composition I've been working on lately here is this. Just some really fast compositional studies about just some like a nautical, maybe a fishery building next to a lake or a resort of some sort. But a little thumbnail sketch again, just putting the composition together. Is it in the right place? Or I want to shift it over? Does it really belong there? Just little things like that to kind of put together some composition work and begin to finish the sketch out. And again, all predicated on getting a good battle plan ready for when you move into a watercolor of these examples. And I'll show you why in a moment, because I think what's really critically important about, sometimes it's good to have a sketch in watercolor, sometimes it's just good to go in there with a watercolor and just blast it through and just tone it as you go. But I think for my purposes, especially some of the work that I've been doing more recently, just slowing it down a little bit, do some little thumbnail sketches, some storyboarding like this, and begin to move it into a final little comp study. And I started something here. Let's go to this next one here. This is what I started with. I just want to show you how it all begins in terms of putting together the composition pieces. So I'll begin with a little pencil sketch like this and just kind of laying it all out. Go back in and reinforce this thing. Get a light source established. Tone a little bit. And back in and pick up some of the actual elements of the form itself. Cast that shadow on top of roof structure. Just got to bring up the values here from time to time. Throwing that into place. A little bit of ground texture in this thing. Pull that off to some sort of a little bit of an inlet for a water study. Go back in through here. Get a little bit of this content underneath there, shadow under the overhang. Same with this guy, this little lookout tower up on top of the actual windmill itself, which is just going to be. And get a little bit of this in place. Cast across that shadow here, bring the other in the building in place, and just put some graphics in here. Kind of a little bit of character or personality. So there's a bit of a start there as far as putting together a little thumbnail sketch. And then let's go back in and look at this. Get that all set. Put a little more shadow in here. A little more foreground. Take this off in the inlet. Get some of the reflective into the actual water system here itself, just real subtle. Bring some of the foreground in. A bit more texture. So this eventually will be all brushwork, but just sometimes it's nice to get a good character line set up on what you're going to do with as far as the reference is concerned. in black and white. Just a nice little thumbnail sketch to kind of get you started with it all. And then get a little bit of sky tone behind it all. And then the coup de grace, the actual power structure itself. Laying that in. Reflecting in a little bit of the water surface ahead here. And let's see what that does. We come back in behind it a little bolder, some stronger foliage in here to kind of break up the shape a little bit. Just enough contrast in here to get this thing to kind of sing a little bit more. Get back in behind here, a little bit more contour off in the distance. It's a neat little thumbnail sketch in terms of what that thing might begin to look like as far as composition goes. And let's kind of straighten this up just a bit more. More impact, that's one little thumbnail to it. Another approach might be this, where you come back in. Turn around and maybe go the other way. Oh, let's get a little bit of stick on that side. A little bit of line weight back in this thing. Some composition down. As I said too, I go through an awful lot of, not an awful lot of, but I do a lot of time invested in putting together just little thumbnail sketches like this. It really makes a huge difference in terms of putting together the right composition. Let's see a little bit of contrast back in through here, see what this does. Kind of reflect a little bit and some sort of water system below that. There you go. So a little concept sketch there, just a series of thumbnail sketches on putting together what I refer to as like little watercolor roughs or comps to kind of help you through the process here. Let me sharpen these sticks up a bit here. It's a lot of fun, just putting together little thumbnail sketches like this. Just what am I looking for here? And again, this is a series of really fast little thumbnail sketches on like windmill studies and how to put the little compositions together. And eventually turn them into some watercolor frames, and interesting set of circumstances here. So if we were to pick one here, just to see what it might look like, it's kind of a nice little, maybe we frame this thing in by doing the following here. Maybe there's the capture of it right there. And that becomes maybe part of the composition. We can expand it over to one side or the other, but just kind of get a feel for where we are with this stuff. And then maybe there, and I bring it down to about maybe right about there. Maybe add a little bit more contour in this thing so it changes pace a little bit. But then that would be a pretty good format in terms of putting together maybe a little watercolor comp for that particular composition right there. So I'd say that's pretty healthy as far as, just again, the thing that I enjoy most about this is the relaxation of putting together just volumetric forms. And we've talked about this before from an industrial design point of view. But again, if you notice, every one of these shapes and surfaces have, again, the volumetrics. So there's cylindricals, there's spheres, there's rectangular forms, everything's in there. And quite honestly, the thing I really appreciate about going through watercolor studies and fine artwork is that I can take that principle or those fundamentals of thinking into the design stuff that I do for vehicle design, transportation, or product design, interior space, and everything else that we're dealing with. So it's really interesting how they all transfer over and you allow them to kind of work for you as opposed to against you. So let's just do this for a moment. Assign this guy and get that out of the way. So there's another little thumbnail sketch there for what might be taking place. And it's out this side. In a moment, I'll show you the transfer from the actual pencil sketches into the actual finished product. So interesting here. Just again, looking at little things like real rough, fast little sketches here. So kind of character down, and all of a sudden just getting something set to just look at for composition. I'm going to undershadow the overhang. Bring this into play here. Let's get that set. A little bit of that brilliant shadow. Again, just a little fast little black and white concept sketch. Pretty good, maybe a simple little watercolor site. Let me just kind of finish this up a bit here, or draw through this guy. And there it is. And we'll put a little bit of background behind that too. Pardon me as I sharpen the stick here. Sharpen this beauty up. A little bit of backdrop in there and kind of ghost in that building. Again, just really fast little composition studies about, is this the right approach? Do I want more fullness in this guy? I don't want to keep it that simple. How direct is it going to become? Just really fast little architectural, more watercolor concept sketches here that maybe become part of the vocabulary for future use. And this is what I really enjoy this side of the process. It's always amazing to me how this stuff just really kind of turns into some really interesting material as far as concept work goes. And again, I can't stress enough how important it is to really understand that when I go through all this stuff, and hopefully when you do as well, that you're dealing with volumetric materials and perspective. All these elements come together in watercolor. But I think the most important aspect of watercolor to me is it's so explosive. And I think that I'm learning to do is how to become more transparent with some of the color use. Sometimes I go in really heavy with it and it turns into mud. I've gotten a little bit better with that. just I'm learning to see that the more the water content is, the more fluid it's going to become, and therefore the more transparent it is. So, well, that's going to be very interesting, and I've learned an awful lot from that very process over the last few months. Whenever I work with it, years ago I started with watercolor, enjoyed it, and picked it on up, still working with it, and little by little I'm getting better as I go here. So let me just kind of wrap this little black and white sketch up here, and we'll go on to some other things. I'll show you some of the outcrop of some of these sketches that we did a little earlier. So again, those are a couple little thumbnail sketches here. Let's do this. That's set up. So again, just a kind of review here real quickly. Started out with a series of thumbnail sketches like this, and then we went, let's see, 1, 2, 3, and the fourth one there is already in. So let's go back and look at sketch number 1. This little thumbnail, this little picture story I put together here. So let's kind of move this off to one side. This is the family of sketches I utilized to put together the actual some of the watercolor content. So from that thumbnail sketch, this was the product of the watercolor. Let me kind of move this in just a bit. So there it is right there. So you can see the relationship one to the other. There's the concept sketch, a series of little family of studies I did prior to going into watercolor. And this is a very quick 5x7 composition. Using a lot of burnt siennas and umbers and dark greens and hunker greens, some ultramarine blues, terracottas, really interesting mix. I keep a very simple palette for that reason. But this sketch from start to finish, once I got this guy done, was about maybe 45 minutes to an hour's time. I don't like to spend more time on this stuff because the more you work with it, the muddier it gets and the less spontaneous it begins to look. So there was the first sketch we did. Let's kind of move these aside here for a second. So that was the compatible piece there that one went with. Then we went to this guy, and this again, really quick, tall, thin building, a fishery of some sort on lake or some sort of resort, and put together the composition with the boat in the foreground, middle of the background, maybe adding an outbuilding. But this is the composition I utilized here. So when we're all said and done, this guy turned into, here's my final comp right here. See if I can move this over enough to kind of see them together. There they are. So there is a genealogy of thumbnail study into watercolor. Again, notice very transparent, a little bit better. I'm getting much better at transparency, for example, here. I'm still learning how to put together the right consequences or frequency of speed. Has a lot to do with it too, laying down a wash and just letting it run and let it take care of itself, getting a lot darker to light. Little things like that have been an incredibly powerful tool of learning for me, and really good to know because, as I said earlier, I begin to utilize this material back into my design stuff, vehicle design, product and architecture, interior space. It all becomes useful. So that was the second family we did. There it is, 2. And the next one we did was this. One of these little lighthouse, windmill studies. So then the windmill study came in, and then this was the result of this thumbnail series here. I just went ahead and put this together, and there is the actual finished product right there. So that's where that one ended up. Again, notice very simple color palette. Let me move this over just a bit more. How's that? Any better, guys? Very simple color palette, for example. This is kind of the composition I worked with here and put it in the color. Again, really interesting rose madder, some burnt siennas, some raw umbers. Again, ultramarine blues and just blues and greens put together, and ultramarine and raw umber and the burnt sienna together, making a really neat, rich combination. Keeping it very simple. Again, not much better transparency in here. It's a real learning exercise for me. It just changes so dramatically from moment to moment to moment. But those are some of the studies we put together here. So that was the net result of the thumbnail sketch and putting it into the real 5x7 watercolor. And again, as I said earlier, I do not spend, I'm not trying to be braggadocious here. I just want to be very careful how this context is taken. I work very quickly in watercolor because if you labor at it, all of a sudden it begins to really muddy up and you lose the spontaneity which you're after. So I think that's a really critical part of it. 1 hour at max. I give myself 1 hour, get it in there, sketch, lay down the watercolor, lay down the fluids, pick up the details, and get out of it as quickly as I can. So that was a combination of that set. And this is just a little series of what-if sketches I might be working on later on to kind of develop some of the themes. So let's kind of put that aside here, and we'll show you what else has to take place here. There's a little, again, pencil sketch. And then I went back in. Here's some other variations on theme. Let's kind of pull these together here side by side. Let's see if I can get these up out of the way. And there's another watercolor there, another little 5x7 study. And then last but not least, another little 5x7 study here. Let's kind of move those down. And let's get these out of the way, and we'll see what we've got. Again, really fast 1-hour sketches, just laying down color, keeping it simple. And again, what I'm really happiest about here, and again, I've got a lot to learn, what I'm happiest about is all of a sudden you start to see a lot more transparency taking place. I'm learning how to get more water in the situation, being less flooded with color, and letting the actual washes do the work itself. That's the real learning curve for me. It's just not easy. Never has been easy for me, but it's a great medium to work with. And again, because it's instantaneous, it's very spirited, it's extremely transparent. It can be also very romantic in terms of telling a story and be very fluid. Neat stuff involved in the whole process. So there's some of the examples at 5x7, and let me just do this to get these out of the way. I'll walk you through some other things I've done here in the past too. These are some very interesting. There's a little watercolor study of a little a barn system out in Pennsylvania. Again, a real quick little watercolor. These took a little bit longer, maybe 40, a little bit hour and a half. Just laying down a wash. Notice I start to get a little bit muddy in through here, but again, a little bit better out and through here. But it's really been helpful to get this process down, casting shadows, keeping the palette simple, not a lot of color, just enough little violet in the sky to kind of give it a little character, and reflecting that back in the pond surface. Been very, very helpful indeed. So that was one approach to it again, with this whole process of watercolor. And here's another one that I just did, much more rectangular format here, but this is done. This was done at the lighthouse at Squirrel Island in Maine. Again, notice how it got really muddy. Again, this is okay. I'm not really enamored. I mean, I think the lighthouse turned out really nice. It was nice and simple because it's much more direct and a very non-complicated form to work with. Pardon me, the difficulty is when you get into a lot of foliage and water and so forth, I had a tendency at this stage of the game to kind of overbuild it. I'm still, I'm happy with it, but again, it's not as clean or as fluid as I'd like it to become. Some of the sky system worked out pretty good. I'm getting a little bit bolder here, maybe get a lot more transparency. I've learned how to get much more transparency in some of the foliage work and trees and so forth, and some of the soft sculpture materials, the more I work with it. So that's been fun too. So there's another little guy on this side here. This is another little sketch here, a little castle in Kilch, Scotland. Again, very simple, very barren almost approach to it. This thing truly sits on an island up in the Firth of Scotland. And again, a lot of reflection back into the water. Not bad. Pretty interesting composition for the learning point of view. Very good to see in terms of composition. Very simple structure. Again, this is all done with just basic yellow ochres and burnt siennas, and just kind of toning it back a little bit, making sure the work is really doing its job for me. Then a little bit of the background work, and again, the yellow ochres, a little bit of grays and ultramarine blues, and again, mixing some of those dark greens. Those are the guys that give you a lot of fits. The foliage is really tough to do. Those who do it well, I really admire and respect, and I've been picking up on some lesson plans and looking at things to kind of improve my expertise in that area, or my approach to it. So that's a little watercolor study. This is one of my favorite locations in Scotland since I was born there. This is Eilean Donan up in the Firth. It's again a very simple composition, not bad. Pretty interesting things back in the sky. I'd like to do a little bit more clean. Let's do a little cleaner with this. It got a little bit on the touchy side because trying to get some of the offset surfaces to work and so on. But not a bad approach to it at all. Again, a great monumental piece of architecture to deal with, and such a timeless piece with the bridge that was connecting the land over to Falkirk in that area. It'd be beautiful. It was really an interesting, very, very beautiful setting. So again, great subject matter. I mean, again, watercolor is a real passion for me. I can't stress enough how much I love it. I wish I'd do more. In fact, you know what I might do is bring in a blank sheet here, put a little sketch down, bring some watercolors in, do a real quick little demo on a watercolor study, whether for its architecture or landscape piece. I'd love to do that, and if you think that's a viable thing to do, great. I'd love to hear your input on that. So there's Eilean Donan and the castle. Eilean is the old Gaelic term for island. The Donan Castle by the Mackenzie family, no, pardon me, MacDonald family, I believe, that occupied this during the 13th or 14th century. So very classic piece. They went back in. It was in disrepair several years ago. They went back in and renovated it, brought it back up to a natural architectural treasure for the country of Scotland, and then it's paid off terrific dividends. It gets a lot of traffic from time to time now coming through the islands. And then the last but not least, this is a simple little watercolor study. This is probably about 10 to 15 minute expression. Just so simple. And I think this is where things began to break through for me a little bit. Again, very simple, good little sketch. A little bit of a more of a reflective quality here in the actual pond out front, but again, very, very spontaneous, almost abstract, like foreground and in the sky. These are the things I've been working on to kind of improve as I go, and I think that's the thing that I've really been really fortunate to kind of look at here from the point of view of going through watercolor as an expression of getting ideas down. And again, I cannot stress enough, what I've learned the most is be quick. And it doesn't matter, for example, quick doesn't mean you rush through it, but just make a decision, lay down the water, let it do its job, or the color, the tint, and let it do its thing. As it settles in, you can go back and be a little more transparent with it, and then settle all of it to get those elements down. Some of the feeder, the backbone, or the guts of the process, and begin to slow it all down and pick up some of the details. For example, like in this building, some of the pond up front. So that's basically it for the overview today. I decided to kind of switch gears and take a little bit of time to go back and not be so mechanically minded. Automobile product and architecture and some of the other things we've done in the past. And I would like to maybe set up the studio here and bring in some materials, lay down a board, and get a sketch on it, bring some watercolor in, just go through a rhythm of here's how we start, here's we added this, now we added this, and hopefully we get to develop a nice little watercolor study for you to evaluate. This has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed this. It's one of my, as I say, great passions. It's always been a lot of fun to work with. And again, I can't stress enough, the reason I switch back and forth between fine art work like this and the landscape or other compositions and fine art is because I really utilize those pieces in my industrial design work. There's a great crossover and a great application to working with both. So there's assets in both ends of the scale. You can get too mechanical sometimes and be very stiff-hearted, and the other side of it might be too lucid. But there's a nice balance here that watercolor begins to afford for us when we begin to work with this material from moment to moment and lesson to lesson. So that's a bit of an overview here. Some of the old stuff, some of the newer stuff I've been working on. I think these are the guys that I think are really going to put a lot of stock in. This has been a lot of interest here. Let's put this up to one side. We're going to get these guys side by side. It's a pretty nice little menagerie of sketch work here. This was done some time ago, about a year ago, about 6 months ago, and these are more recent. And there's been some changes. It's got a little bit better, but there's a nice, I think there's a nice style influence between the two. A little fuller, more abstract, and I think that's a combination I'd really like to kind of focus in on as we move ahead and advance this stuff, and show you more demonstration work. And even in some of my sketch work for industrials, and even this stuff is so much more powerful. I think this is an area that I absolutely love. Let me get this out here. This stuff is time immemorial. The more you work with those little thumbnail sketches, the more you begin to teach yourself about what's good, what to emphasize, what to leave alone, where you want to place the emphasis, where the shadows go, what the light source is doing for you. Makes a huge difference. So I'm always prone to put together a storyboard. I like to go through a series of thumbnails such as this to get to the final product. And I think the final one, yeah, it's right here, pardon me, let me drop that as we work through it here. That kind of produced that final, which I thought was really a lot of fun. It just it took a lot of the ease or the pressure off of what do I do next. Until I get more comfortable with this, I always like to put together a plan like this, follow that format and value, and then put it into color with a very simple palette. So once again, gang, I really appreciate the time. Hope this has been helpful to you as much as I've enjoyed putting this together for you. Again, in closing here, no matter what the subject matter is, it doesn't matter to me. I think the thing that the subject does matter. Let me take that back. But what matters most is getting into the theme of sketching and how to draw this stuff and how to work with it from a very lucid point of view. Drawing, you can't take away the value of good drawing skills. You know, I'm still learning. I'm sure, like you are as well. I'm still learning how to put together the process, and I think the more you draw, the more the subject matter changes, the stronger your vocabulary gets, and the more confident you become. It's not all cards, it's not all product, not all architecture or interior space. I move around for that very reason. And I'll also change technique. I'll go from bond to newsprint to watercolor board to tone paper. I'll move around quite a bit to keep that mind active and fresh in terms of approach and skill and technique availabilities as we go through it from time to time. So all kinds of great assets come about as a result of working with this stuff, and I think that's, to me, the key. Anything, and please, if you have any commentaries at all or things you'd like to have me work on, I'd love to be able to help you with some of those cases if I can do so. I also take commission work, so if you know someone who is interested in having a piece done, whether it's product design or a piece of fine art like this, you can contact me at jim@drcontrast.com for commission work. I would love to do that as well. And above all else, just great to be on board today. This has been a real good, refreshing thing for me to kind of put back a little bit, sit back a little bit, look at some of the fine artwork, and what the application of watercolor does, and then move it back into some of the design work we'll be doing later on as we go through the messages here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So thank you so much for joining in today, folks. And I can be reached at jim@drcontrast.com. And if you have a quick minute too, I would really appreciate too, drop me a note at jim@drcontrast.com. That would really be helpful. And my website is drcontrast.com. If you go there, for example, if you're looking at it, there's an interesting series of line drawings or a 9-lesson plan that takes you through the process from basic perspective into volumetric studies. Very reasonable priced, and it's getting a lot of feedback and good impact on the internet. So again, that can be reached at drcontrast.com. That's my website. And also on my website, you'll see my YouTube, Instagram, and Twitch programming on there as well. And we're adding to our store. We're finally getting that finalized. We're getting some of the final roughs together for apparel like t-shirts, and some other poster graphics will be added to it as well. So stay tuned. A lot of neat things happening. Again, thank you so much for tuning in today. And I always sign off with this because I think it's the most important part of it all. Never forget to remember to dare to be great. All the very best, gang. We'll see you on Tuesday. Take care. Thank you.